And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. I apologize in advance. I'm at my sister's place once again, and the internet connection here isn't as quality as where I come from. But also, I've realized now that part of the issue is the processor speed on my computer. So I am going to be looking into a computer with a processor like i5 or i7 or better, so that these will be a little bit more smooth in the future. So we can all look forward to that, including myself. And today I have with me my friend off of Twitter there. His name is Lone Wolf Atheist. He used to be known as Godless Musician. And today we're going to talk about his journey away from religious beliefs and everything that entailed, and we'll get into relationships that may have been soured because of it, or some that may have improved, or whatever. But anyways, dude, take us back to, I guess, your earliest reckonings of when you sort of started believing that this stuff was nonsense, the journey you took to becoming the atheist activist that you are today.
Oh, man, there is so much to go through in such a crazy, what seems like an eternity, but in reality must have been still short-lived life at the moment. But I would say that the first time I really started asking questions, like legitimately started asking questions, was probably about, I'm honestly going to say 3 years ago, but the questioning started way back when I was like, I would say like way younger than that, 10 or 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there, right? As when I like honestly started kind of wondering, and I'm not sure if other people have experienced this, including you, especially even at that age, but like I started like really wondering, like, why were we even, like my family specifically, why were we even getting into, this thing that you would call religion? I don't even know if you would call it a thing or not, or at least the concept of the belief in a God, if you will. And that always perplexed me, I think, in a lot of different ways, because it was always something that I had wrestled with from a very early on. And a lot of the wrestling that I did as a kid always had to deal with not being able to see this thing that, or God, whatever you want to call it, right, that we were supposed to worship and, give lauds and praise and, adoration, and everybody, does it a little differently. But just, I kind of, a lot of times would just kind of sit there out of boredom and would always wonder, like, okay, like what's kind of the next step? Like, what would I be doing in terms of, trying to actually commune with this God, with this, deity, whatever. And, I would ask a lot of those questions, and a lot of times that would get suppressed, sometimes by me, but a lot of times by the church. And this is something that I would end up having to address later on with my parents as to why, I felt like I wasn't allowed to ask questions and whatnot. So really, the reason I say,
Sure.
Yes, I was asking younger, but the reason it didn't start until about 3 years ago was because of just the level of suppression of the ability just to simply ask a question when I was younger.
Well, they always ought to question, right? So.
I'm sorry, you broke up. What was the last thing you said?
Oh, I'm sorry. They often tell you to never question.
Yes, that's a true statement. And I didn't realize how bad it would be early on until I got further and further into not only my adolescence, but into my college years especially. So I grew up largely in, like I've been telling my story somewhat on YouTube when I can, obviously, because I'm busy, and, me being in the military and whatnot, I can't have a consistent like schedule of when I want to put stuff out, unfortunately. And a lot of that suppression, I think, in terms of
right,
just being able to ask questions, came really early on when I was in the Southern Baptist Church. And I don't know if I had mentioned this, maybe I have. I'm kind of talking about it a little bit more and more. The more and more I'm and I'm talking about it more and more, the more comfortable I'm becoming with just being an atheist in general, is that I grew up largely in the Southern Baptist Church, and when I was about 15 years old, my parents were approached by a pastor and his wife of a Pentecostal church. And this is kind of where I think I definitely differ from a lot of people, because it wasn't just any Pentecostal church. And this is where it's kind of weird for me. So I largely grew up in the Southern Baptist Church with just like both my youth services and the regular services being rife with like the hellfire and brimstone preaching. And I never let it get to me early on as a kid, because I was like, oh, whatever. It's just, the preacher spouting something, and then I'm going to go home and like play with my friends. You know what I mean? Because it's a weekend, and, I want to go play with my friends. And I mean, what kid active, relatively active kid early on didn't want to go play with his friends? You know what I mean?
Oh, of course.
And yeah, and those sermons didn't really start getting to me until I was about 12, I'd say maybe 13. And I noticed that just every time they spoke about it, it just began to, it's almost like a very like kind of dread is creeping on you in a way. And it felt like this dread was just finally starting to creep at that point after hearing these sermons for seemingly years and years and years. And it wasn't until about that same time as well that I had started to notice that like literally every time they spoke about it, I almost became, I don't know, it's a very odd kind of daunting silence. And it was coupled with dread. It was coupled with despair. It was coupled with even at times, and as young as I was then, it even was coupled with hopelessness, because there's a lot of rapture preaching within the church too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm coming through right now, but can you actually hear me right now?
I can hear you perfectly, actually.
Oh, okay, great. Because the little green dots don't pop up for whatever reason on here, but I think that's all to do with my processing speed shit. So, anyways, carry on. I just want to make sure.
Fine. I can see that you're talking just fine. I honestly don't know what the issue is. Like you said, computer could be a thing. It is a thing. So when I started feeling this dread, like I said, I was just starting to come into like my teenage years. And like, I think looking back, I realized I was like very much I was that angry teenager, not because I was angsty and not because, yes, the hormones coupled with it and whatnot and all the changes and whatnot going on, but I could not, I guess, I don't know really how to really describe it, because so much happened at 13. Like that's when I started realizing that not only did I not like going to church, but I literally hated like not just every moment going there, but I hated every sermon that ever came out of that pastor's mouth, because it was nothing there. And again, I don't know what people have experienced in their churches and whatnot, those who are coming from a religious background, but it just seemed like there was a lot of hate being preached alongside that, whether it was something about, and again, I didn't know what a gay person was back then. I was 13, 14 years old, like living a somewhat sheltered life, Yeah. The church was my life. I was in every Wednesday and Sunday. I was in an every Wednesday and Sunday church going family. Like that was my life outside of school. And whether it was getting involved with like just certain after school programs in the church, whether it was getting involved with, I don't know, just I picked up a guitar when I was 13, and I started, kind of just using that as an outlet for having to deal with a lot of just the anxiety and anger that I had because of everything that was being preached to me. I literally grew up that whole time, even through high school, with being told that I was not allowed to question for a couple of different reasons. And again, anybody can relate to this as they need to, but or hopefully, like, I kind of realize I'm not the only one that's went through this, and I'm assuming I'm not, which is, one, the reason you don't question the teachings of the church, much less the existence of God, is because it's not only considered a sin, it's considered blasphemous. Now, I'm not like 100% sure where the line is between blasphemy and what a sin is, Never was able to figure that out, even at my most devout. And
Right.
that always confused me. I was like, well, wait a minute. If I have a question, why am I not allowed to ask it? And the excuse always was because it was just and again, I never got an explanation. It was just blasphemous. It was sinful to ask questions. And really where it got to me and was when they told me that the other reason you don't ask the questions in the church is because that would not, they played the, I don't know if you would call it a guilt card or whatnot, but they played the honor your father and mother card, because they taught me in my youth services, at least specifically in the Southern Baptist Church, that whatever the church believes, your parents basically mimic. And
Right. Yeah.
I would later talk with my folks about this, and my dad, who actually was the most surprised about all of this, that was like, yeah, we had no idea they were telling you that. And I was like, well, they taught me that I couldn't ask questions, and that's why, I stayed silent for so long, was because they said that, like, to go against you was also to go against not only God's will, but it was also to go against the church as well. And so that's what I was taught at a very young age, and it was instilled in me for a very long time. Even when we were starting to go to the Pentecostal church, which, like,
oh wow,
that's a whole, hold on, I need a drink. Yeah, that's recalling some strange memories, dude. So yeah, I would go through that, and I would then, my parents, like I said, they were approached by a pastor and his wife at the time who were running this church, which was, again, a Pentecostal church, not too far from where we were originally going. And there are a couple of things that have been going on at the same time. Like, my parents, I grew up in a very artistic family. I grew up with a dad who is very much into theater and the theater and performing arts in general. And I grew up with a mother who had been dancing since the age of 4. And so I naturally, because of just this is one of the things I'm very grateful for in this regard, is one of the things that they allowed me to do was to be able to, if I had some sort of artistic bend or dream, is to follow it. And so they were like, yeah, you want to play a guitar? Like, let's do it. And so, like, they just let me and my siblings all pick up different instruments. Like, at one point, my sister was singing and playing piano, and my youngest brother, he's just now picking up guitar, I guess, again for like the second time, and he's like playing every day now. So it's like, okay, like, and like we were a family even still now that still encourages like the arts and whatnot. But yet the dichotomy for me also came on early on, where the church wasn't really too fond of, an arts program within their system. And so in the area of, so I'm originally from Houston, and the area of Houston that we originally grew up in, like, for a couple of the different churches, and not just the ones that we went to, my parents were very instrumental in starting what's called a fine arts program, where we could, and this is also part of the reason why we ended up being a Wednesday and Sunday family, as I call it. We basically like fathered and started a whole bunch of just art, like, it's basically liberal arts programs, like with dance and like music and putting bands together. And that's the whole reason, because my parents had past experience with doing that, even though they raised 4 of us. So I don't know how the hell they do it. I don't know how the hell my parents ever did it. But kudos to them. Seriously, I don't know how they put up with me. But
oh yeah, my niece has 4 kids too, and I don't know how she does it either, man.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. That's where I am at right now. They're all out back. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Kids, they're a thing. Yeah. I don't even know what to say. I have a 7-year-old niece and a 9-year-old nephew, and they're a handful, but I love them. And so, anyways, like, so we we would go on and on we would jump, not all the time, but we would jump to two major different churches. And I didn't know anything about the Pentecostal church. We went to actually what's called an Assemblies of God church, which I found out is a branch of Pentecostalism. So again, all these like finding new things out at the same time. And the reason that we would eventually be pulled in again is the same thing, developing of these, programs where, people can come in and like, if they want to learn an instrument, they can. If they want to take dance lessons, because my mother was basically the only dance teacher you could. If they wanted to start up a theater program, like everybody talked to my dad. That's just how it was. It's like they were very much, when I was growing up, they were very much social butterflies. And sometimes that bothered me because it may not sound like it now, but I'm kind of introverted. And the only way I feel like I can safely express myself, and some of it does have to go back to the fact of, the emotional trauma within the church I experienced. The only way I can express myself is through my music, because that's my safe haven. And that's just been something that has at least been consistently there for me the whole time. So,
right.
So then, like, we would get into, really get into the, the services and whatnot. And, here my parents are, my mom's going back and forth between, by the way, this whole time we're like going to these different churches and jumping in between and starting all these arts programs. My mom's actually going to Israel pretty regularly throughout this whole time. Like
wow.
she'll go she's been, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably at least 5 or 10 times that I can count myself. And now here's another surprising thing about my family that if you knew me, a lot of people would probably not know. Neil, do you know what the Feast of Tabernacles is?
Do I know what it is?
Yeah.
Are you talking like the picture, like the Last Supper sort of thing?
It's so kind of, but it's
because if you're thinking of what it is, it's a Passover Seder, is it not?
So the Passover Seder and the Last Supper, that's all. Oh God! Now I gotta somewhat. This is a somewhat dive into the year of Judaism that my family spent in, which I
lived in Israel, so.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I lived back there. I lived there for almost 3 years, back in the 80s. Yeah.
Oh, when it wasn't so bad, huh?
Well, they were at war with Lebanon mostly in those days.
Oh man, okay. Was that like around the time, or was that before or after the Yom Kippur War?
Oh, it was after.
Oh, yeah. See, I don't know my history very well. That's something I need to brush up on. But so yeah, she would be going. Basically, it's the Feast of Tabernacles is this giant, and I mean massive, basically couple days long stage performance that would honestly, like, I've seen video of my mother, and this is like not video that like our church would produce. This is like video from the people that are obviously overseas in Israel with like all the TV productions and stuff like that. Like my mom's been recorded by like Israeli TV. She's been she's met with Ariel Sharon back when he was in power. Like I don't know how she pulls off these connections. I wish I could give you some of those answers, because again, I think it has everything to do with the fact that she's a social butterfly. Yeah, although in her later years, I noticed she's starting to become more introverted. I think she's just wanting more and more time to herself. I don't know. Anyways,
yeah, could be.
But so she would always be going back and forth. And a lot of the times when she would be going back and forth, the heaviest amount of times she would be going back was while we were in, the Pentecostal church and whatnot. So we would still get the hellfire and brimstone preaching there as well, but it wasn't as severe, which was really weird to me. It wouldn't be as intense, although if you live in Southeast Texas and you go to any one of those churches, you understand how big and booming of a voice and the effect that has, especially in a giant hall, almost cathedral-esque kind of church that you attend, and how that reverberates and almost, I don't know, it's really weird. I used to look a lot into like the psychological stuff as to how, like, the Catholic Church used to be able to basically set a mood for you, why they organized everything a certain way. Like I was into all that because it legitimately fascinated me as a musician, especially when they started talking about how they arranged the positioning of the choirs and how they placed the pipe organs and whatnot. So again, that's all very fascinating to me. But when we were going there, more of what they were talking about, it was almost like it was almost shame based. And that was another thing that bothered me too growing up was like, wait a minute, why am I going from a church that teaches me that basically like I'm a good for nothing, who like if I don't, get baptized, if I don't live on if I don't do, and I was taught in two different churches, I would say, one that taught good works, which was the Southern Baptist one, and then there was the one that taught me how to live by faith alone. And I'm sure you've heard that phrase many a times from other people. Maybe you've heard it around other people that so you understand, like at least you understand what the phrase means when people say like, hey, like if you just have faith and you believe that, Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, then you're going to go to heaven. It doesn't matter.
You're
like
saved,
what.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they have contradicting verses in the book itself. So in one I can't remember which is which, but one of them says you'll be known by your works, not just your belief, and the other one says you'll be known by your faith and not your works. And it's
right, and that was one of the things that didn't bother me right away, but that was just one of the things that stuck in my mind. Is like, wait a minute, I was raised a majority of my early life in one style of sermon and teaching, and then when I'm like basically at the height of like that and I can't believe like I'm saying this, like I said, I was a very angry kid. I was a very angry kid growing up, and I think a lot of it was because I went from one very suppressive form of not thought crime, but not being able to ask questions, to a church, like I would say, that taught thought shaming, which is completely different than having a system that teaches you that it's not okay to ask questions, it's not okay to think. And that was also the first time that I had noticed that I had been hearing the phrase, well, it grieves God when you do insert blank. And
right. Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Just, and again, it was a different variation on the suppression of asking questions. Not necessarily. This one was weird because it wasn't suppression of thought. It was suppression of asking questions through shaming you because of your thoughts, instead of suppression of asking questions because, and again, in the Southern Baptist Church at the time I was growing up, well, we're the church and we're God, so we say so, versus shaming. And I'm like, oh God. So like, that's why I was so angry growing up, is because I literally felt like I was in a prison. And my escape from all that came right after my graduation, which is when I was offered a scholarship to a school in Jackson, Mississippi, of all places. So I've been born in Louisiana. I lived there. But I've also lived in Texas as well. So I was like, well, okay, let's go move to a different state. Let's just check it out. Let's see how it is, get somewhere different. And so when we did that, or I did that, my parents were initially like reluctant because they didn't want me to leave. But like my dad would convince my mom, like, hey, like our son needs to be like his own thing. Like he needs to do his own thing. So like he's 18, 19 years old and like he needs to go figure life out. And so I felt like I was going nowhere fast, but like that scholarship kind of gave me like a little bit of more motivation. And so I was like, well, all right, cool, let's take it. So I ended up auditioning for getting into their music program, and I met the guitar teacher there. He's really cool. We still talk to this day. I love talking to him. Like he's really cool. But that is where really the setup of telling myself that it's okay to ask questions began. Mm-hmm. Was at a private Christian university, actually. And I was surprised that my music department chair actually sat me down and said, probably the one thing I've been waiting to hear my whole life at that point. So I'm about 19, 20 years old when he's finally telling me, hey, like, it's okay for you to ask questions. Like, I don't know how you grew up. I don't necessarily care. But at the same time, like, if you really want to know, like, God's word, and you really want to know, what your walk in faith is going to be, if you really want to know how he's going to guide you, you need to ask those questions. You need to be doing things that, build yourself up so that, it strengthens you. The walk is your own. And that's just something you need to figure out. And I did not know that that was going to be a catalyst until like way later, because he actually and I would talk to him multiple times, and a bunch of my professors multiple times, about just, hey, like, I think it slowly started as what question should I ask? Because I wasn't allowed to growing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you ever tried to ask questions, what happened? Like, what did they say to you?
Okay, for what I'm going to say, again, like, nothing against my family or anything, but a lot of times I would get punished for asking questions, not by the church specifically, but by my parents. And they a lot of times would think, and again, like, I have nothing against my parents. I do legitimately think that they actually tried to, and trust me when I say this, based on the area we lived in, of all the families, they at least tried to raise a decent human being growing up. So it's nothing against them, but a lot of times it felt like I was being punished for a form of insolence, because I would always come back angry, and they would not know why. And when I would try to explain it to them, like, my mother would throw Bible verses at me, thinking that was some way that was going to calm me down, or maybe explain some like far-fetched and far-off concept that I'm supposed to understand. And I'm like 10 years old when this is starting to happen. And if it wasn't that, it was some sort of like, and again, I don't know how like you or anybody else would have grown up, but like, I grew up being spanked. And so
yeah, me too. I think it was the norm back then, but not like spanked. I mean, there was one incident where my dad, let's put it this way, my sister and my mom thought he was going to kill me, but that was one incident. But every, smacks to the back of the head, like, or thrown over the lap with a couple whacks on the butt, that was the norm back then.
But that didn't happen. So my question to you would be, that did not happen often with you, did it?
No. Well, I wasn't the best kid in the world, but no, it wasn't an everyday occurrence, but it happened probably more than I liked. But I was a troublemaker. I was
See, I was not a troublemaker, and this is the part that bothered me, was I was not a troublemaker, and it was a weekly occurrence. It was a weekly occurrence that I would be taken in and paddled for some reason. Not hard, because like my parents, like,
why is this happening?
Yeah, no. And there were some I remember very vividly growing up. I don't remember what age, but I remember growing up some weeks where, and again, I can't believe I'm saying this, it literally happened for no reason. Although, like you said, similar to you, I was not the best kid growing up. Very angry one, yes. Mostly well behaved, yes. But there were times where I wasn't. But there were times where I literally did absolutely nothing to incite that, and I would just get it anyways. I don't know what I did, and I never knew what I did. Like, I don't know. That does bother me a little bit, but it's just something you'll live with. It's something you live through. My parents never put bruises on me. My parents never, threw me around. They never roughhoused me. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't abusive, but it's just, there were times I got punished as a kid. And I think that just kind of stacked on to all the stuff that I was experiencing, at home, at church, at school. And then I never was homeschooled a lot of these people I find out. And I find out just kind of watching other people you interview and other people that,
Yeah.
you know, I do watch from time to time, like an alarming amount of these people are homeschooled. I went to public school my whole life up until college. So I
Right.
lived in a dichotomy where school is teaching me one thing, you know, especially when I get to high school about like, you know, science, evolution, physics, how the world works, how the universe works, that sort of thing. But and then here I am in this world, this other world, going home where it's like, you know, God, Jesus, Jesus, and you know, and then I'm living in another world in my own time with my own friends. And I actually did have a high school band, which kind of took up some of my time, which was kind of nice. Where like I'm playing music, but I don't know, it was really weird. Like, we never played Christian music as the band, but like we would always get together and just play music. And my parents didn't really seem to have a problem with that, despite the fact that they still restricted the type of music I listened to, even up until the point where I left through college. But luckily for me, I like hauled ass and got my driver's license early, so I could just use the radio as my outlet too. I'm not stupid.
Sure. So when they were keeping you from listening to specific kinds of music, when you started to discover all the different types of music, were you kind of surprised at all? Like, wow, this is awesome stuff. Why weren't they letting me listen, kind of thing?
It was a little bit of that, yes. It was, but it wasn't more so that until I started actually to get into college more and more. So as I was getting a little older, you know, I was starting to discover older stuff, and there were a lot of times where, because I'm a huge like lyric person. I love to read the lyrics of people because it shows me a lot about who they are, and it shows me a lot sometimes about what the band is about. And it's always fascinating to read like a story or a concept, or even if the song is about nothing, like a lot of System of a Down songs are.
Right.
So it's just really
I hear
cool.
you, man. I'm the lyricist in our band, so I hear you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm the guy that writes all the words.
Oh, I write all the, like when I write, it's just I've slowed down on the words a little bit, but it's mostly guitar and some bass is what I do.
Nice.
But I don't have a bassist. I just like use a recording program and kind of just go from there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, like I said, like I was living in I guess what really also frustrated me was I was living in a bunch of different worlds. There's the musical me, the musician me. There's the church going me, almost like a facade I had to put up. And then there was the public me that everybody saw. And you know, I had even like right up to college, I'd gone through several different I had several different knee injuries, which bothered me. Actually, some of it still does bother me to this day. Good, but even though it was so long ago, I used to play football growing up, and so I mean, because I mean, it's Southeast Texas, and there's not much to do. So what do? You're a kid. You want to take your anger out. You do it legally.
It's like a law.
Yeah, it's pretty much a law next to gods and guns, right? So
Exactly. God's guns and fucking football, and don't say anything more about it.
Yeah, nope. That's pretty much true. That's pretty. That was my growing up. That was my childhood. But there are a lot there's a lot there that I still do not regret in terms of, you know, just being a part of. I don't know, like now that I'm getting into working out and sports a little more and more, I'm starting to get that competition like bone back in me, like that like the ability to want to compete and play music again, and just I don't know, just do me. It's kind of nice and refreshing now that I'm in a different spot of life and can appreciate something like that. So after I graduated, so I don't mean to diatribe, but like again, like I guess it's just better to explain that I lived in a bunch of different worlds and it was rather frustrating. I'd been playing. So I started like a actual like basically full-time band in college. So we only ended up playing 3 different shows, and after that, we just kind of went our separate ways and it didn't go anywhere. It was just kind of a bummer because I really enjoyed that, and I miss playing on stage a lot. It's not the adrenaline rush I care about. It's the ability to just have people come up to you afterwards and be like, "Hey, man, that was really fucking cool. Like, where'd you get the idea for that?" Or like, and then to just sit back and have a beer with somebody, or just sit outside.
Well, shit, dude. When you go live and you do have people come up to you after the show, and they're telling you stuff like that. That's a good feeling because it means that what you're doing is touching somebody or it's meaningful to somebody. And when they say that they enjoy it like that, it means something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to get the crowd,
it means it's not wasted effort, or like you're.
Yes.
Right.
I agree 100% with that. I haven't been able to put it in words in such a long time, but that's probably the easiest way to describe what playing on stage feels like, and then meeting people afterwards. So the very first show we ever played was the Battle of the Bands at our college, and we didn't mean to, but we started a mosh pit with my band, and we got a chair in the cafeteria thrown. So I did. That wasn't the intention. We were just a hard rock band that wanted to rock out, and we ended up starting a small pit and getting a chair. One chair. It was only one chair, but damn it, that was the best chair in the cafeteria from that point on, man. I'm telling you.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, I mean, hey,
one chair.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start small, and you got to appreciate the little things in life like that. God, I had long fucking hair way back when. Jesus, it was past, like, my hair was past my shoulders, but it wasn't as long as yours.
Well, mine's back in my hair to the back of my pants, actually. So that's pretty fucking long. It's the longest I think it's been in my life.
I didn't think it was that long. Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. If I pull it to the back, if I pull it all the way to the back, like attempt to do a ponytail with it, and if I stand up or sit up straight, I can reach around the back and I can tuck the edge or the end into the back of my pants.
Oh, okay.
That means one of two things: my hair is really long, or I have a really short midsection, which isn't the case. So,
oh no, I've got a I've got a large wingspan and a not fairly short, but a somewhat short midsection. So, not that really matters, but I will say at least the compensation I get in terms of, like, hair and whatnot is that I can grow a mean fucking beard, and I'm very proud of the fact that I can grow a full beard in less than 30 days, dude.
Nice.
Oh God,
mine grows. I got to trim it at least once every 2 weeks. I got to keep it shorter, or it just gets.
Is there a reason you do that, or not really?
Well, the reason is because if it gets too long, it distorts. It doesn't look like it always does. So I keep it a certain length. I let it go to be about maybe an inch at the most, and then I shave it down again.
Oh, see, I don't have that. I never had that problem when I was growing out my beard. I never had that problem. So I don't know. Maybe I got lucky.
Yeah, maybe. But if I don't trim it, it just looks all unruly and crazy out of place, and sticking out on the side here and sticking out here. It looks like I got gills and whatnot. So.
I can imagine for some people that's why they, not you specifically, but other people, that's probably why they stay baby faced their whole lives. It's because it just looks bad. Period. But so, oh God, where was I? Yeah, so band, college, dichotomy, worlds, multiple worlds living in. I ended up so at that point, after we had split with our band, I've been doing music for about 10 years straight at that point. And so I felt like I needed a change in direction. So I basically walked away from my roots growing up, and I was talking with a friend of mine, and I actually ended up meeting with a Catholic priest way back when. And I was about 22.
Good. You were past the age of interest to them anyway. So.
No, I could not only beat up him, but I can beat up his God too. So.
Don't touch me, mister.
That's not all we talked about. No, I'm just kidding. That's not, no, but like this was someone who is.
One quick second. Sassy, I see your comment in the audience, and the answer to that is no. Okay, carry on.
No, that's fine. Oh, I don't have my stuff turned on. Oh, that's a bummer. Well,
she said, telling me to cut the hair. I'm like, no.
No, that's a blasphemy. I don't care. No, stop it, Sassy. That's a blasphemy. Neil's hair is wonderful, and you need a timeout.
Yes, go sit in a corner. Put the I did a wrong thing hat on, kind of like a dunce cap, but you know.
I was going to say dunce cap, but no, that was I guess you don't really have a timeout corner hat, huh? But,
IQ's like, do you know Samson? Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah, well,
you cut my hair off, and like when Dorothy throws the water on the witch in the Wizard of Oz, that's what happens to me. I can't cut my hair. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you cut your hair, you turn into a bass player.
By the way, my bass player finally gave us the final word. My bass player, Peter, is no longer in the band because he took on a business that's now taking up his entire amount of time. So we are on the hunt for a bass player again.
Well, if I was in the Vancouver area, man, I'd take you up for a jam or two for sure.
Sweet, for sure.
But yeah, man, I want to do some more traveling, and that's one of the things that I would say the Navy is actually kind of like bit me with is the travel bug. I've been on two different deployments. I've been on to 5 different countries, and on the journeys in between all that, man, I can't even begin to describe. I can't even begin to talk about because there's so much that happened in between. There's so much that happened, and when I first joined the Navy, part of the reason I joined the Navy was, like I said, I've been playing music for 10 years straight, and I got burned out, and I was like, I need to change. I need to do something different. I'm literally like, I was literally the living epitome of a starving musician at that point. I had no money. I had my gear. Don't get me wrong. But like, I was broke. I was without direction. Like I was just mentally and emotionally exhausted from a lot of the stuff that I had been going through, especially after meeting with the priest and whatnot, going to the church and whatnot. I had gotten up to the point, and this is part of the reason why I almost converted to Catholicism, was I had gotten to the point of I did all the sacraments, and I was getting ready to, all I had to do was my first confession and take my first communion. That's how close I was to converting. And the reason I did that was because of all the churches I had ever been to growing up, and especially all the churches I have been to in college, he was the one that actually invited me, similarly to how my music department head did it, to ask questions. Like he wanted me to actually come to him and talk to him. And that was the first time that I had like legitimately had ever experienced that outside of this very just rigid, uptight Protestant upbringing. And that's why I followed through up to that point. I don't know what happened, and this still bothers me to this day. And by the way, it's pretty much at this point 10 years ago was when I actually walked away from the church. Like I stepped foot in a church one last time. It was a Catholic church. I remember this, and I don't know what happened. Maybe it was something with the sermon. Maybe it was something with just, the environment as a whole. I don't think the people were bad, but there was just something about, and we as musicians talk about a vibe of something, right? Like a vibe of just, hey, like, if you're trying to play a song where it's like, oh, I'm not really feeling it today, dude. Or like, I'm not feeling this crowd, man. You know what I mean? Like, do you get what I'm kind of getting at least in that regard?
Oh yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
But, it was like that within the church. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm done. I'm not going to go to church anymore. And just, there's something about the mood of the place, something about the energy of just, again, it wasn't the people, it's just the energy of that place in general. I was just like, I don't know what was going on with me. Like I was done. And it still bothers me that I cannot figure out why I left. And I really wish I knew why.
Well, let's talk about that. Did you, at that point in time, did you have yourself still convinced that a God existed? Absolutely,
I did. I was thoroughly convinced. And here's why I was in part at the time, was because I would go through a lot of the motions. And this is when I started getting more heavily invested in the Roman Catholic Church. I was going through the motions of, the praying and the going through the sermons and the communion and the whatnot, and
Mhm.
when I would do a lot of those things, I would honestly say that was the first time in my life. Oh God damn it! That I oh yeah, those are Jack Daniels burps, man. Um, that was the first time in my life that I can honestly say, like, I thought I had felt God's presence, because there was something to me. There's something really. I think it was just because of growing up in a very large dichotomy growing up. There's just something about being a heavy metal musician during the week, and even on Saturday and Sunday at times, because we did play one Sunday show, but that was kind of a weird little thing that we did. I don't know why, but it was just like, oh, you want to go play a show on Sunday? Sure. So we gathered up the band, traveled, and played. But so I was a heavy metal musician on the outside, but every time I went into this church, I would, there was just something about the way that their routine and rituals did. So it almost felt like it did something for me. And every time I quieted myself, I would feel like I'm actually feeling the presence of God or the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Because I use different terminology depending on the Protestant I'm talking to, and I can't believe I'm actually saying that, but I do use different terminology depending on the Protestant I'm talking to, and or the Catholic I'm talking to, and
Sure.
I would feel this, and it was the first time that my anger went away. It was the times that just I could really sit and like really listen to what's going on in my head, as well as listen to what I felt was like in my soul. And there was almost this sense of calm that I would continually experience every time I went there. Nobody was, and I think a lot of it had to deal with the fact that nobody was forcing me to go. I was going on my own because I was legitimately trying to find out what the solution to a lot of my problems were, what the solution to like my anger was. And it just seemed this getting into the quieting of yourself and the oh God, what is the way to describe it? It's the getting into the just the routine of being able to be in the presence of God is just kind of what put me at ease. And that's why I took it so serious, the Catholicism so seriously for such a long time, was because I felt good going there. I actually for once had a community that didn't shame me. I didn't have a community that wasn't judging me on my race. I don't even want to get into that, because I grew up a lot with just different and this is another thing that's tied into like not just religion, but just my growing up as well, but just happens to coincide with the fact that it was tied into religion as well, was just the racism that I experienced in the area of Texas that I lived in. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all Texans are racist, but this area that we lived in definitely were. Like, I'm a mixed kid, and back in the 90s, in a small town that had a Klan chapter, that was a no-no. And so I lived with that for a little bit, but not so long that it stayed with me for a long portion of my life. But just, the one or a couple different brush-ins with people who were racist towards me, either because my dad was Spanish, or because my I even got racist comments from people because my mom was married to a Spanish person, not just because my dad was Spanish. And I even got comments because I was a mixed kid. I am a mixed kid. Like, I take a lot of pride in that. It's not like the central focus in my life, but just having that grown up from when you're about 8, 9, 10 years old, and having that be a huge part of, especially when you're in college as well. Like, I grew up with people in college when, backtrack a little bit to the 2008 election when Barack Obama was about to get elected. I grew up with people not only like in high school who would have said stuff like what I'm about to repeat. By the way, I just want to say in advance that I don't believe anything I'm about to say, but here's what I heard growing up during the 2008 election when Barack Obama was getting ready to be elected, which was, I would hear people not only throw racial slurs toward him about towards Barack Obama all the time, but I would hear people use varying phrases of, I don't like the idea of seeing a black man in a White House. And like, that blew my mind, that people were, it was 2009 when people were in 8 and 9, when the election was just not only going on, happening, and then Barack Obama getting elected. But that blew my mind that there are these like super religious people who have it ingrained in them that that's not okay. It doesn't matter what your politics are at that point. You are literally judging somebody because of the color of their skin. It doesn't matter whether Barack Obama is actually half black, half white. It doesn't matter what someone's pigmentation is. It matters whether or not they keep their promise. It matters the content of their character more. But they have to pick such trivial, stupid things like that.
They're taught that, though, dude. Racism is taught and learned by those people that are being taught that, right? Like it's ridiculous because it's all superficial differences. Everything we all share, like pretty much almost all the same DNA, except for minor bits and pieces that make up our exterior. We'll say that's it. Like in my books, there's one race, the human race, and just like every other fucking species, we come in a variety.
I like not too many people I knew growing up had that viewpoint that you did. And I grew up, oh God, I hate to use this phrase, but I grew up very white, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that against anybody who is white. I don't mean that. I really don't. Like, it's just, I'm
kidding.
No, I know. But, just, I grew up with people telling me that I was less because I was a mixed kid, that I wasn't pure. I grew up with people throwing the N-word around like it was just a common part of speech. I grew up with, because I was Spanish, like with all the racial I grew up around and with all the racial slurs that were being thrown around because of just my being a mixed kid. Like, I don't tell my parents some of the horrible things that people used to say because I'm like, it's not worth it. I grew up. I grew past that. I grew out of it. Like, there's no point. There's no point in judging somebody by something that is just so minor in my book. It's awful. Yeah, it is awful that in 2000, right? But it's also in. It was also awful that in 2006, 2007, when I was first going to college, that I was still hearing those things. That in 2006, 2007, it was just being okay, just now being okay at the time, especially in states like Mississippi and Alabama, that it's okay for white women to date black men or the other way around.
Right.
It was like, what? That was the same city that a decade before had held the largest Klan rally in the United States of America. Like, come on now. Like, how indoctrinated do you have? And this is one of the dangers and problems I have with religion, and especially with racism as well, is how indoctrinated do you have to be that you cannot claw yourself out of that? Like, and this is the damage that it does. This is the damage that stays, and a lot of people don't recognize that.
Religion's a poison. It poisons everything.
Christopher Hitchens, God is not great.
Yep.
I'm on chapter 10 of that book right now, and
are you? Cool.
Yes, it's been a wild read. Even though he is passed, he is saying a lot of things that I wish I had the courage to say all that time ago, even after I had left the church. That is the one thing that I was missing so long growing up, was the courage to now I get it. There's some nuanced situations where you can't necessarily speak up, but just simply having the courage to embrace, not because it is a courageous thing to embrace something that you did not grow up with. It is a courageous thing to embrace change in who you are. And where that gets to me is when I was taught that I was taught a lot of the same misunderstandings that people still have to this day when I was a Christian was, I was taught atheists were devil worshippers. I was taught that atheists, I was taught those things, man. And I believed it because I never met an atheist. I never met a Satanist. I never met, and you want to know what the crazy part about all that was, is some of my best friends in high school were not only pagan, but they were atheist as well. And I had no idea of what the concept of an atheist was, because my parents not only never let me be around them outside of school, but they forbade me for a time to even hang out with them when I was in school. And because I had been yes.
How could they stop you?
At a public school?
Yeah.
You tell me. I think it had everything to do with the fear that was instilled in me from early on. And the fear that I would, if I tried to associate with someone who is different than me, that I would be not only disobeying the word of God, I would be disobeying my parents. That's literally what indoctrination does to you, my friend. And it's just so disheartening to know that I could have had different friends and could have made better decisions because of that. And after we left high school, so here's the crazy part of me growing up in a heavily Protestant background, is the high school I went to, even though it was a public high school, the town that I actually lived in, which was outside the Houston city limits, was predominantly Roman Catholic. So I not only caught Roman Catholic hate, but I caught a lot of Latin hate as well. And here's why I say that. Have you heard the term Latin shaming?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I also experienced as well growing up. Is the Latin shaming from the predominantly Mexican Roman Catholics. So it wasn't just the flack that I was getting from the racism as well. It was the flack from the again, they were a minority, but they were still a more predominant group in the school in general. I was catching a lot of hate from them as well because I wasn't Catholic, because I wasn't considered a true Hispanic. What the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah, you got me there. I don't know what that would even mean. What is it? Why would it even matter as a human to human experience thing? Why would it even fucking matter?
I talked to the people that I grew up with. I still could not get that answer. And I, honestly, that's just one of the things I have to come to terms with, is I'm never going to get that answer. I grew up in a town that was predominant, not the city of Houston, because trust me when I say this, the city of Houston, very, 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 very liberal. A lot of the towns outside of it, not so much. It's a ring of red that surrounds a giant blue hole, basically.
Yeah.
And that's fine. At least that's one of the things was I always considered Houston my safe haven growing up, is because I not only worked there, I not only had my first full-time job there at 18, but I had part-time jobs in between, my summers in high school and whatnot, but I had my first full-time job in Houston. And so what did I do with a lot of that extra money? I would just pay my own car insurance, pay my own gas, and whatever I had left over, I'd go fucking party wherever I could, or go to concerts wherever I could. When I was 18, 19 years old, still living in the city, I did what I wanted to. And, for a time that was nice. And, but,
consequences be damned.
Yeah. No, I think my first true concert I ever went to was actually DC Talk, if I remember correctly. Way back when, dude. Way back when.
Way back when.
Well, for me it'd be way back when, but for you, I don't know what that would be. But
last week,
probably.
For me, way back when was going to see Kiss in 1977. That was
that had to have been cool, man. That had to have been awesome.
Yeah, we got my cousin owned a company called Periscope Productions that did all the concert tours here in Canada. So we used to get free tickets all the time. And we used to go into the press box and watch the shows from the press box. And then, of course, meet the band members and stuff. I didn't meet Kiss at that time because I was too young. And I think I was 11 or 12 or something. And we had to go home right after the show. But anyway, after that, I met a bunch of people. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And Loverboy opened for them being Vancouver, which is where Loverboy originated, and
Yeah.
they got booed off. They got booed off the stage. It was pretty funny.
Oh, well, so Canada has, I've noticed, when I was growing up, I would have considered the music coming from Canada like hit or miss. But the more and more I listen to what comes out of it, like if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Voivod is from Canada, correct?
Yes, they are. They are. They are. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I got that right. Excellent. Let's see if I can remember who else is from there. I know you and I had talked in private chat before, but Devin Townsend, he's from your neck of the woods, correct?
I know him personally.
No fucking way. Like, are you fucking with me, or like you actually know him?
I'm not fucking with you. I know him. I don't.
Okay.
We're not like best friends or anything. We've been to a handful of things together. I hung out a lot with his bass player from back in the day, from back in the Strapping Young Lad days.
But
Jed,
that's what, Byron Stroud?
Yeah, like that's no Jed. Jed came after, but I was really good friends with him. So and we hung out quite a bit with him, stuff like that. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, no, Devin Townsend's music literally re-energized my desire to play. I was at a really dark spot about 5 years ago. This ultimately, this would be the next set of catalysts that would cause me kind of down my road to deconversion, if you will. It's strange that all this is going to culminate into one final point that finally caused me to sit down and say, okay, like, what do you? And I'm talking to myself, like, what do you actually believe? Like, where do you stand on a lot of these things? So yes, part of it had to do with the fact of, I know it's going to sound strange, but Devin Townsend reinvigorating my love to play music. So some of it did have to do with that. A lot of it though had to recently deal with the fact that, okay, let's go back 5 or 6 years. What had happened? I was just showing up to my first boat. So for anybody who's watching, I am a fast attack submariner. I qualified submarine warfares 5 years ago this month. So I am a qualified submariner, and there's a lot that goes into it. There's I'll get to that in another time, but just I had been pushing myself really, really hard to get qualified as fast as I can, because my grandfather at the time, he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had both colon cancer and a brain tumor, and they tried everything they could to save him. And they gave him 6 months from after his last surgery, and he ended up lasting a little over a year. So that stubborn son of a bitch fought as long as he could. And I love that man. I love that man to death. And he taught me a lot about, next to my dad as well, my grandfather taught me a lot about what it meant to be a man. And so I take a lot, granted in my own stubbornness, I'll admit that, but from them. So it was the fact that I was trying to get qualified fast to go see my grandfather, hopefully before he passed away. But I never got that opportunity. So we were out to sea. We were getting ready to pull in. And I got a message the next day, because I had duty when we pulled in, that my grandfather had passed away. And I was like, I asked my people in my chain of command, I was like, why? I was like, I got to go. Like, I want to see my family. Like, I haven't, like, I could tell my grandmother's grieving. Like, I need to go talk to them. I need to go, like, make sure, like, everybody's okay. And my captain flat out told me, no, you're not leaving, because we're deploying in like 2.5 weeks.
Right.
And that hurt me. That hurt me so much. And that honestly was like one of the things that had started like the next portion of the buildup of the giant snowball, if you will. So it was the fact that I left on my first deployment, not being able to say goodbye to my grandfather. And then on my way back from my first deployment, I had gotten notice that my grandmother, so on my dad's side, so I at one point in my life did have 2 living grandfathers and 2 living grandmothers. And I'm very grateful for that. And I really relish in that fact. I just wish I would have gotten to know them better. And, but sometimes life happens, and sometimes There are just some things out of your control, and the best thing you can do is just try to make or have good memories with some of these people. And I wish that, as crazy of an old man as he became, I wish I spent more time with my grandfather. But the military takes a lot out of you, and it takes a lot of time from you. And I don't want anybody to think that I regret it, because I don't. But I wish I put more emphasis on my family all those years ago, because that really, to me, is what's more important. So after my grandfather passed, after I came back from my first deployment, so I had 2 out of 3 at the then living grandparents pass away. Like my grandmother was having some health issues that were like literally years in the making, just because, so both my grandparents passed in like their late 70s, early 80s, so they lived a long life. It's just it's very frustrating, because, like I said, I wanted to say goodbye, and I wasn't allowed to, because my obligations took precedent, and I was forced to make my obligations take precedent. So that kind of soured and disheartened me for a very long time. And
I bet.
So after I got back, after I went on leave and visited my grandmother, and this is about 8-9 months after my grandfather had passed, she wasn't looking good, and so she ended up actually moving to Florida, where my parents currently live. It works out for now, because she's close by in case anything happens to her and whatnot. And then there had been a lot of going-ons in between then. Like my divisional chief actually, in a way, tried to make me tap, and I'm not a quitter. And he tried to do so in the most awful way possible, which was trying to mock me. Like, he literally mocked me for trying to go get mental health treatment for a lot of the familial problems. And he did it out in the open, in front of not only the rest of my chain of command, but he did it in front of my captain as well. And my captain just let it slide.
What a dick. Like, why would he do that?
Because he cares more about breaking in his knee pads and his promotions than he does about the people he fucking works with.
What a dick.
I lived with that.
I had to go through that.
I lived with it. I lived through it. I'm a stronger person because of it, man.
Yeah, that's the best way to look at it. Makes you builds you up better, I guess, when you're able to say, you know what, your bullshit doesn't bother me, or doesn't affect me. I'm not going to say it doesn't bother you, because
it definitely affected me, even though, which is really, again, that was another one of those weird things where it was like he bent over backwards to help me, but he wasn't beyond mocking me in front of the right people.
Oh, I see.
So I don't get it. I've never understood that.
That just makes him a bigger dick in my book. In front of the right people, like
the people who affect your promotion. That's what I'm talking about.
What's the point? Does he not want you to advance or get better or be promoted?
Oh no, he tried. He actively tried to get me promoted ahead of time. He actually did try to do that. But he also tried to take my mental health down with me. So I don't get it.
Yeah, you're right. I don't either, because it doesn't resonate with me. I'm like, why? That's almost like contradictory behavior.
Dude, he's really good at sucking dick, man. There's no other way to put it. Like, he's really good at sucking dick. And anyways, so it was that. Then if it wasn't for the fact that like I had somebody else step in who was higher than him and basically say, hey man, like you really need to go talk to somebody. And I did. And part of what I talked about, even after leaving the church, in my therapy was largely a lot of the stuff that I got in my life in my boat. But some of it had to deal with the stuff I talked about in my therapy was the dichotomies I had growing up with like not only believing in God, but having to live what seemed like a double life. Like I lived one life in what it was the public, and then I had to live like a different kind of somewhat private, sheltered life because of my religious indoctrination and upbringing. And that's a lot of what I talked about in therapy. next to the fact that, I couldn't visit my grandparents when either one of them passed away. I
Yeah,
should very fortunate that I still have one living. I think the only reason I think the only reason she's going to keep living for as long as she is going to be is because she's stubborn. But so, I mean, you know what? She's happy and healthy, and she doesn't really have any complaints, so I can't really complain there.
that's awesome.
And
That's
so,
really cool.
and actually going back to the whole racism thing, surprisingly, it was my mom's mom. So that grandmother that is still alive, that's the one where I caught a lot of the. She is racist herself, but not when it comes to her grandchildren.
Right. Well, yeah. That would be weird, I think.
Oh God, she was definitely racist towards my dad.
Really?
Yes. Oh God, yeah. Especially when my mom and him were first dating. And again, like this isn't a recent conversation I had with my parents. Was I found out my grandmother and my grandfather, so my mom's parents, were both very very racist towards my dad.
Wow.
And my dad's
Well,
and my dad's parents were very against my mother, because she was not Roman Catholic. So this is what I mean when I go and talk about the Latin shaming that goes on, especially
mhm,
with a lot of these like
mhm.
families and whatnot. Like that whole thing came from my dad's side of the family because my mother wasn't Roman Catholic. The racism thing came from my mom's side of the family. And it just so happens that both my parents basically told their sides of the family, like, no, fuck you. We love each other. Like, we're actually going to try to make this work.
Mhm.
And that's how I ended up
Wow.
here.
As a result of that.
Yes, because of their own stubbornness, but in their own different ways. God damn it! Why are both sides of my family so stubborn?
Yeah, humans in general, I find, can be really stubborn. Just give them in whatever day of the week they seem to want to be. So
I can be bad, but also realized that even though I can be bad, it's not a bad thing to be humbled, if that makes sense.
it's not bad to be humble, not at all.
And that has actually caused me to do a lot of introspective, like looking at myself, and that's kind of what caused me to um, really barrel into like a lot of the things that I believed in. So it was all the stuff that was going on with the Navy that had really caused me to like go to therapy and take a really hard look at myself, not just like who I was, but really start to unpack and deal with a lot of the indoctrination that I dealt with as a kid and as a teenager. I didn't really. It was really weird because I didn't really deal with it so much in college, which was odd to me. Even though I went to a private Christian school, I never dealt with it, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because like a majority of the professors, even alongside my department head, were like, "Yeah, dude, you need to figure it out on your own."
Mhm.
And
That's good.
and looking back, like that's literally the best thing they could have ever done for me. Was like, "Hey, man, you know how to ask questions. Just ask them, and then figure it out from there." And
Yep.
okay, cool, awesome. And like nobody chastised. That was the first time in my life, college, where nobody chastised me for asking a question. Where I was always chastised and guilt shamed and guilt tripped in the Pentecostal church specifically because I wanted to ask those questions. And
Sure.
that was, I was both physically baptized, like water baptized, but I was also spiritually baptized. Like my pastor growing up in the Pentecostal church believed that like if he like and he wouldn't like hit you, but if he like bopped you on the forehead, like he would think that he was imbuing the Holy Spirit into you.
Of course, he's probably convinced himself that that's what he was doing.
I guess I never got to ask him because he was too busy having an affair. Whoops, did I say something?
Oh, that. Well, don't worry. I'll edit that out later.
Whatever. I'm not naming names, so I don't really care.
I'm not editing shit out of here. Don't worry about it.
Well, like I said, I'm not naming names. I think that's about all the respect they deserve from me. But so yeah,
Yep.
no, it was a series of that and culminating in the therapy, and it wasn't until after I met my now ex-wife and started dating her that we originally met when we originally met at a coffee shop. We happened to just order the same drink. I wanted to get away from the boat for a while, so I went out in town, and I just wanted to get away and go like see the sun, because as a submariner you don't see the sun very much. And so that is one thing I definitely do not take for granted. Well, a couple things besides fresh food, also sunlight. But anyways, so we met, we talked, we found out that, and this is where it got really odd for me, was because after I left the church, I actually started on a little bit of a pagan path. Like I was actually a practicing astrologer. And
Jeez.
oh man, dude, I could tell you so many things about that. But I think the whole astrology thing, like you and I will have to have a separate conversation about like how deep into astrology I was. I was so deep into astrology that I was
that path myself.
No way.
Oh yeah, I was a Wiccan. I was into all that shit, man.
I never got to the point of Wiccan, but my ex-wife is definitely a Wiccan. And that never bothered me because, like I said, at the time, like, I had gone through a path of astrology, and I was actually like legitimately a practicing astrologer. I was doing horoscopes for people. I was doing synastry reports for people. I was doing all sorts of stuff for people. Like I was like deep into it, but I never quit it. And I never quit doing that with church at the same time, because I was able to somehow reconcile my belief in God with being able to, teach people about who they are. Because I thought, and this is what I legitimately thought, was I am this is my God. This is literally my God-given gift, is I am teaching people about themselves. I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm teaching them about themselves. Which is something that I cherish, is knowing who you are and knowing who your friends are even. And it never bothered people, which was really odd for as deeply religious as the South can be. The people I hung around with were never deeply bothered with the fact that I both was a practicing astrologer and went to church.
Well, let's put it this way, dude. I mean, if you believe in one set of bullshit, you're probably going to be easily convinced into another set of bullshit.
Well, here's the thing, though. Is yes, no, I agree with you, but here's the thing: is that nobody tried to convince me of astrology.
No, well, that's not necessarily what I mean. I don't mean it doesn't always take somebody else to convince you. You might stumble across some information, see someone else doing it, like what you've heard, and you essentially convince yourself that you want to believe it.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, now I understand where you're coming from.
Because we don't choose what we believe. We're convinced by things and end up believing, are being convinced and end up believing.
Well, I guess in a way why I was so into it was because there was a point where people, not all the time, but there were enough people coming to me that were saying like, hey, I've heard you talk to so-and-so, and you told them things about themselves that they didn't even know. And that was the start of people coming to me and be like, hey, like, do my chart and do some report on me and this, that, and the other. And that felt nice to like actually kind of be useful for a time, outside of school and music and whatnot. Cause I was like, people have questions about themselves and they're literally coming to me. And this is why I did it for so long, was because they were coming to me and being like, and saying the same thing I was about different things, which was, I want to know. And that's why I did it for such a long time. And they thought I was so good at it, which, like, okay, to be fair, I think it's now all bullshit. But like, if you're talking about old me would have been like, well, yeah, let's just sit down and like, let's do a chart with Neil and let's figure him the fuck out. And strangely enough, that's how I was able to pinpoint. Even I was doing it up until about 3 years ago, which is again when I started my whole like questioning path again. So I guess it'd be like questioning part 3 or 4, whatever you want to call it. And my ex-wife and I, we were doing a lot of things together when we could. And, especially in like the whole, like, Wiccan, like astrology path and whatnot. And, we would get to people together with people in like, pagan gatherings. And like, I've done a couple rituals. I've been to a binding for a husband and wife. Like I've done all sorts of crazy things. So like, I'm a fairly open-minded person. And I was getting into it pretty deeply. And but it was strange. Like I was so deep in my Christianity that I didn't question it. But the deeper and deeper I got into like paganism and astrology, that was when I really started questioning, like, okay, like, does any of this like actually make sense? Does any of this actually tie together whatsoever? And it wasn't until after I got married 2 years ago that I started really, really sitting down, because I was at a point where I was getting ready to transfer off of my submarine and go to a different, not sea-based command, so shore duty.
Right.
Right. And that was when I started to have, it was weird. The more and more time I had off to look back and reflect at everything I had been through and everything that I had believed, I started doing more and more research into it. I started doing more and more studying of like the history of Christianity and the history of the Bible and the history of maybe not necessarily how the books were pieced together, but the timeline. I started actually digging more into like whether or not stuff like the time of slavery that the Jews were held captive by the Egyptians was real. I started digging more into the archaeological stuff. Like, is there actually evidence for I can't believe I'm forgetting it. Is there actually evidence for the Exodus out of Egypt? Is there actually evidence for them traveling 40 years in the desert?
No, there isn't.
No, I agree with you. But these were questions I started asking because I had just been so like heavily into it. But then I started digging more into, sainthood and beatification of the Roman Catholic Church. And then I started digging into the history of indulgences and offices within the Catholic Church. And then, like, really what set it off for me was, and why I disavow religion completely, even though I don't disavow religious people, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's we don't hate the people; it's the belief system, or various belief system.
That deserves to be mocked, not necessarily the people themselves, and that's the opinion that I'm at.
Yep. I think most of us in our community would say the same thing.
Okay.
It's not the people; it's the ideologies, it's the ideas that are bad, not the people. And you can have good people doing good things, bad people doing bad things, but it takes something like a bad ideology, like religion, to make otherwise good people do bad things.
Yes, and that was one of the things, but it wasn't until after I became an atheist, and I'm going to very quickly get to that, how I became an atheist. It wasn't until after I became an atheist that I really started to ask the questions of, like, how is God doing whatever I was asking a question about? Like, how is that just? How is the death of somebody just? How is his considered moral actions? How do you consider that just? How do you reconcile that with all the evil things that Satan has supposedly or purportedly done? Not that I think that another imaginary deity is any better than another imaginary deity, because let's be real, it's not. You and I both know this. And so,
of course.
And so after I had started doing a lot of research into, oh, wow, like, there really is no archaeological evidence for the Exodus. There really is no evidence for like the 40 years in the desert. And I don't really know how I got into the venture of digging into the archaeology first versus the origin of the scriptures. I really don't know where that path like kind of led me down, but I've always been interested in history. I've always been interested in how they can find all these things. Like the discovery of the discovery in general has always fascinated me. But it's just the fact that, I mean, one, we can't prove that somebody resurrects from the fucking dead, number one. So that was always the big question for me growing up. I mean, look, you can play the World War Z card or Zombieland card all you want, but like we haven't been able to show that regenerative tissue is anything but I
No,
mean,
man.
there are some
Once
species out there
once
that can do that, but there are some species
once
out there like lizards
cell
that
death occurs, once cell death occurs, there's no coming back.
right, and that's something that again, like basic biology. If you understand the
Yep.
structure of a cell and how it works, then you understand that resurrection is just simply not possible unless you
That's
have
right.
unless you have a Deus ex machina moment, like a literal God out of the machine moment. But you'd have to first justify, much less demonstrate the idea of a God or whatever you would construe to be a God or some sort of supernatural deity that has control over that anyway. But that's a little far fetched in and of itself, and to me always has been. And so that's kind of why I started rather quickly getting rid of a lot of that belief stuff. Was I find it absurd, and I just again more and more digging and more reading. Like a lot of people say, reading the Bible led me to being an atheist. In my case, it was not. It was after I became an atheist that I started to read the Bible more and more. I've probably now read it 2 times over,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't read it anymore unless I need it for reference because it just makes me frustrated with what I
Yep.
read.
Yep.
Like not frustrated with
I hear
people,
that.
but just frustrated with what it says. And um, when that was around the time. Well, so I had kind of done like off and off. I was gone all the time, so I never like being out to sea, being on a submarine. Like you're under the water, you don't really have internet. You don't have internet at all. You barely have email, and that excuse me, that's if the email actually works. And so you're underwater with 130 of your closest friends, and like you're just you're isolated from the outside world. So a lot of times like I was thinking about these things when if I wasn't doing a job, I had a lot of time to watch movies, I had a lot of time to read books, and I also had a lot of time to think. And I don't know if a lot of people have ever heard of nuclear trained people within the Navy, but that's what I am. Is I'm a Navy nuke. I'm an electrician, and we are taught Faraday's law. We're taught all the different laws of electricity and how that applies to, the machines we work on. And we're taught theory to application, and we're taught, nuclear stuffs in general. Like I basically had a bachelor's degree of science and nuclear engineering crammed down my throat in a year and a half. I don't know if you've ever been to school on steroids, but that was awful. That was the most awful experience in my life I think I ever had. Probably that's definitely underneath my grandparents passing, was that schooling and just the rate at which you were required to learn the material. And once I got through that schooling, once I learned how to actually apply theory to application, and once, personally speaking, I broke a couple rules in order to figure out some of the things because, like, damn it, I'm stubborn and I want to know how shit works. And, that's just my personality. But you know what? That actually, that part of me actually saved my ass a couple times. So there is a little bit of good to that. There's a little bit of a silver lining in that regard. So I'll say my stubbornness in some ways did save me.
That's
But
cool.
after I started questioning all everything I had been through, and especially after receiving the, I'll call it a welcoming hostility in the nuclear community. I don't know. You could safely assume that the nuclear community is very scientifically oriented. But a lot of those people that I work with, they're very, and I mean very hostile towards religion. Like they were hostile, like bad to the point where like it was like if I talked about it in any way, shape, or form, even if I wasn't religious, I would get shredded to pieces.
Wow.
It at times would have been pretty bad. So I not only experienced the shredding of, my own thoughts and perceptions of life in the church, I experienced it on the opposite end with people who didn't necessarily prescribe themselves to be atheist, definitely acted like it, definitely spoke like they were. And that's originally why I did not want to come out as an atheist, was because I was going to be seen as that angry motherfucker who's just mad at the world. And I didn't want to be angry. I already have enough anger issues building up to that point. I already had my anger suppressed enough so that like it was just going to eventually bottle over. And sad to say that it did, but in the way that it did, it actually did cause me to find and seek help. And I did seek help. I'm better. I've had to make some life changes, but if you want to make yourself better, sometimes you do have to do that. And
of course,
that is just something that I have to recognize. And when I did that, a lot of the questioning came back about, was like, where is the source of my anger? I started asking more and more recently, like, where is the source of my anger coming from? Some of it is religion. Yes, that is no doubt the source of some of that, but it's not all of it. But because the church was such a large part of my life, that made the most logical sense to start my path to deconversion. And so it wasn't initially a path of deconversion. It was just a path of general questioning. And then I call it, everybody uses the phrase, that one fateful day. That one fateful day in my book is when I found Talk Heathen and when I found Eric Murphy and the gang. And like, I was just literally sitting there and listening to some of these people, like, and I didn't even acknowledge what an atheist was at this point, but I was just sitting there and I was binging these channels. I was binging the Atheist Experience. And then it wasn't too long after I found Talk Heathen and Company and a lot of the ACA shows that I found channels like Cosmic Skeptic and Rationality Rules and later down the road Bionic Dance and
she's been around longer than all of them.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know there were people out there like that who had been around literally as long as I left the church or longer. So over a decade. I left the church a decade ago, man. I never knew that there were people like that. I kind of wish I did a long time ago, but life has its own things in store for you. So you just have to roll with the punches,
Yeah.
And so
I am. The guys from Talk Heathen are great guys too, by the way.
Yes, Eric Murphy messaged me not too long after you sent my name change video to him, and he actually thanked me, so that was kind of nice. And I hadn't heard from him, but I imagine he's a busy man, so he's got life and things to do, so he's got he's doing those things.
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
And be busy, cool, do the things you want, do the things you love, and that's what I'm always going to encourage people to do. And and I'll tell people this because I know that I'd already mentioned it with you and him, is that there was a talk, and I linked it in my name change video, that he had with somebody, and it literally sounded like that the people from my past, this one woman, sounded like everybody. Like everybody uses the term echo chamber, like when they're just trying to like reinforce themselves and their beliefs and whatnot. But this was different. Like when she started speaking the way she did, I literally heard different types of people from both the Southern Baptist and my Pentecostal upbringing. Like I felt like they were speaking back to me, but all through this one woman. And I was like, oh my fucking God, like, what am I listening to? So like, I would go back and listen to just fragments of that conversation. I did eventually listen to the whole conversation when I could force myself to just sit down, listen to what Eric said, listen to what Jamie said, listen to what she was saying. I don't think that this person is bad. I just think that she is in the snare of religion. And I just think that I think she could be. I think that if you teach somebody to think for themselves, that like you've literally given them like an undescribably wonderful gift is to be able to think for themselves. And
Yes.
when I heard that
Not easy to
conversation,
do.
it's, trust me, it's not. There is some days where like, and this is why I've had to step back recently from like, you know, getting involved with some of like the things I'm doing personally and the things that I like watch other people like, you know, that to me have more courage than I probably ever could, in the regard of like, you know, when I watch people take on, and I'm only going to mention them really briefly, but like when I watched Mr. Atheist and Company take on the NIFB cult and just the
Mhm.
flack that they were getting from people around them, and you know the
Yeah, I know, dude.
backfiring.
I'm part of that group, so I know.
Yeah, no, like I mean, my little way of supporting is to put the pumpkin emojis, man. Like I'm all for whatever you guys are doing. Like that,
Yep.
that is just when that goes back like when like the way they speak about the LGBTQ plus community is the way people spoke about minorities and people of different color when I was growing up, and it is disgusting. It is appalling. It is horrible, and nobody should be treated that way. Nobody should be treated differently, not only because of the color of their skin, but because of their orientation or their gender identity. Again, that's one of those things to me that just like the color of skin, that's such a moot point. There are more important things that you could deal with. And you're having to focus on such a little thing that, like, I mean, you're drawing more attention
Dude,
to yourself for being such a hateful asshole that, like, what are you doing with your life?
dude, it's one of those things that who a person is, whether they're transgendered, lesbian, gay, it doesn't matter. That's just who they are, as same as their skin color. And if you're going to nitpick at what people are or what makes them them, then get the fuck away from me. I have no time for that shit. You are who you are, and I'll accept you for whoever the hell you are, and that's the way I think everyone should be. It doesn't matter what people do in the company or in the privacy of their own home or in company of others that care about them or whatever is up to them. It doesn't matter. I could care less what you do, right?
No, and
And I
I
know
agree
that
with you.
it doesn't
Oh.
much coming from a cis white guy, but what do you do? You can't battle that shit.
And
Sorry, I think I froze.
but that's my point though, right? It's like who cares
That's
if
okay.
I'm a
I'm
mixed.
here.
No, but I understand what you were saying and I caught everything that you got, luckily.
Okay.
But again, that goes back
Okay.
to my point. Like, who cares if I'm a mixed child? Who cares if I'm the product of a Spanish? Who cares if I'm the
Nope.
product
Doesn't matter.
of a Spanish father and a largely white background based European mother? Who cares if you're a cis white male? Who cares if, like like my best friend growing up, who used to have a male name but is currently transitioning to be a female. She is transgender. I
Yeah.
acknowledge her as a she. I acknowledge her
Right.
as a human. It doesn't matter whether she's transgender or not. It matters that I acknowledge the fact that she's a human being and she deserves to live. She deserves to, have a productive life as she so wants to choose to. Like, it's not up to me to make that
Yes.
decision. It's not up to me it's not up to me to have to say like, oh, like you're gay or you were born with gender dysphoria, like, therefore like you were, and this all falls back to the most flawed innate social construct that is sin, that really is like religion isn't necessarily the poison. It is social constructs like that really poison the minds of people.
I agree. Absolutely. But like I said, that's what's taught to them in their youth. By we have to break the cycle eventually. A generation after generation being taught the same racist rhetoric bullshit in their families, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, people are going to have to just be like, you know what? No, and not teach their kids. And eventually, it'll dwindle, but it's going to be over time. You know what I mean?
Yes, and like that's like I feel like my parents' generation, and I think some of it again has to do with the fact of me being a mixed child is that like they broke that mold.
Yeah, you're a shining example of that.
And
That
see, like, here's the thing: is like,
and create more life.
right. And here's the thing: is that, like, I asked my dad a long time, like not too long ago. I was like, "You grew up a cradle Catholic. Why did you leave the church? Like, you would have been involved in a culture and a family that not only was expected to be Catholic, but that
Mhm.
was expected to raise their children Catholic." And
Mhm.
and I asked him, and he said, "I literally got no fulfillment out of the church, and I left because it did absolutely nothing for me."
Good for him. That's great.
But so here's the kicker: is like, and my mom grew up Wesleyan Methodist. Like, she grew up like super traditional, like Methodist, not Catholic light, as I jokingly call it. Um, and so she,
I've heard that before.
yeah, no, there's a lot of similarities between like liberal Methodist and Catholic churches, except for the fact that with Methodists, they actually have the women folk allowed to be preachers, and
Right.
you can only be a male priest in the Catholic Church. So,
Right.
but adornments. What's the word?
Adornments.
There you go. There you go. Thank you. Those are roughly the same in that regard, which always struck me as the odd. Like, can you do colors? Can you do colors other than white and gold, please? Like, it's so boring. They're not bad colors. They're just boring. I don't know.
White and
But
gold. Welcome to heaven.
pretty much. So, when I finally so going back to what we were talking about, like when I finally heard, like I said, the echoes of my past coming back, that's when I finally had to sit down and, like, okay, you've already done all this research, you've you've literally looked into it as much as you reasonably could, or at least as much as you could stomach, and
Mhm.
then I was like, well, what do I do now? So I got to a point where I kept listening more and more. I don't know. It was like, I don't know. Like, it was just like a hunger that couldn't be, like, listening to them and listening to the AXP, like, was just like a hunger that I couldn't satisfy my hunger. I had to keep going. I had to keep watching. I had to keep listening to these arguments. I had to keep listening to the theist arguments. I had to keep listening to these pagan arguments. I had to keep listening to these people who aren't so sure. I had to keep listening. Like, I just had to keep listening. It was this like vicious cycle of, like, I gotta have more. I gotta have more. I gotta have more. And like, I would do it with every single channel that I came across, including, like I said, Bionic Dance, etc., etc. Like, and I would eventually find Genetically Modified Skeptic and a bunch of those other people, right? And again, it was just spiral off of all those people. And again, like, the more and more I listened to them, I was like, I can't have enough. I got to keep going. Like, they're teaching me things that I never knew. Like, and they're not being a dick about it. And
Right. Yeah.
and finally, like, it got to a point about a year ago now. Actually, this August will mark my first full year as being an atheist. And so,
Oh wow.
yeah, no, it's only been a short amount of time, but as you can tell, there's a lot that's happened in between. And
Yes.
when I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm literally in an information overload. I've got to stop. I've got to sit down. I've got to sort this out. So I did that
Right.
for a good while. And then I finally got to a point where I was like, this is it. Like, and that's probably not the way to say it, but that's really where I was at. And I was like, okay, you are thinking, like, me personally, and I'm talking to myself, I'm saying you are literally saying to yourself, you're not sure if you believe in God. Like, that's where you're at. You've done all this research. You've had time to live life. You've had time to not be sheltered. You've had time to figure out what you do and don't believe on your own. So, and it really perplexed me, because I was like, there's no way I can be at this point. There's no way I've arrived at this point in my life where I'm seriously saying, okay, like, I'm making a decision on whether or not I believe in God, because I just took because of what I had experienced, I just took God to be this real thing, this real person that I was finally, after leaving Protestantism and almost converting to be a Roman Catholic. I took it to be so real that I was like, no, there's no way I'm fighting this. There's no way I am having to deal with the fact that that I'm actually wrestling with this. There's no way I'm wrestling with the fact of I don't know if I believe in God or not. So I said, okay, so here's what I did. I went to bed, and right before I went to bed one night, I said, okay, if you wake up and you are not convinced at all after everything you've learned, then just say it as it is. And that's what I told myself. So I went to bed, I woke up, and I thought, after I woke up, I thought about it more and more. And I said, okay, you got to be real with yourself. And this is the part that honestly and legitimately did scare me for a time, was the part that I was sitting there one morning, and I remember it because it was just me and I was still married at the time. So it was me and my wife at the time. I said, okay, just say it to yourself. You don't have to say it out loud, but say it to yourself. You do not believe in God. And I was like, what? I was like,
did it feel like a weight was lifted off your shoulder?
Not instantaneously, but after I sat down with my wife at the time, because there have been a lot of intramarital problems that were going on with us that kind of not spurred that on. But when I came out to my ex-wife as an atheist, she wanted absolutely nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing to do with me. And
wow.
Yeah, like I thought experiencing that with some of the friends I lost growing up was bad, but to have your then wife turn against you because you became an atheist, that hurt. That hurt so bad, man.
A person that claims to love you that does that, right?
Yes, we in our wedding vows, because we were such video game nerds, like she claimed that she would forever wanted to be my player too. And like that really moved me. Like that really sat with me, because like we used to game together a lot. That's just something we like to do. And I didn't know that my life was going to take me this direction. Like what was I supposed to do? And when I sat her down and I was like, hey, like I said, here's what I said to her was, I love you. And I feel like as your husband, I owe it to you to be incredibly honest with you. I said, I don't believe in God anymore. Like and then when I finally actually uttered the words, I don't believe in God, like not just trying to sugarcoat it, actually legitimately saying, I don't believe in God. When I finally said that, everything went away. The guilt, the shame, the nightmares, the guilt tripping that I had ever experienced, the shaming that some of the other people had tried to do to me. It was almost like it was gone overnight. And I was like, wow, I'm actually happy.
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's amazing what disappears when you finally realize it yourself, we'll say.
It was not an easy transition, though.
Yes, Richard in the chat had a quick question about your science training. Wanted to know if that was partially responsible for your disbelief, we'll say.
No. So when I went through a lot of the things I was learning about, I learned a lot about chemistry, molecular physics, nuclear physics, construction of different materials used in the reactor plants, chemistry, radiological fundamentals. So I learned about, there's a little bit of biology mixed into that as well, because you had to understand how the different energies involved in radiation affected your body and how it had the potential to alter your DNA, that sort of stuff and whatnot. Again, that's all very fascinating, and I'm very, very glad that I went through all that, because that taught me a lot about not only the human body, but it taught me a lot more about the complexity of what it takes to run a reactor plant. And trust me when I say this, even though I may be a disgruntled submariner, it still in some ways is very fascinating. It is it is just so awesome. And I think this is where my love of learning has returned in a way, is that it's just so awesome to learn something new. And I think that if I'm going to pass a message to anybody on tonight, it's that don't be afraid to learn something new, and don't be afraid to try something new at the same time. Now, right. It's strange that it's coming from somebody like me who's an introvert, but it's taught me to enjoy certain things in life a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So around the same time that I had just come out to my wife as an atheist, and her not only explicitly stating that she wanted nothing to do with me, but showing through her actions that she wanted nothing to do with me. Like, I called my parents, like, and it's probably one of the few times like I ever cried, period, in my life. Is I called her and I was like, I told my parents, I was like, I think I'm going to have to divorce my ex-wife because, and they were like, why? What's going on? And so, like, I had a really long conversation with them one night, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to go ahead and tell you and Dad this because, I was afraid to tell them I was an atheist because because of just how like religiously indoctrinated we were, and just because of like how religious my parents were and how radical my parents were growing up, and some of that stuff is just still like, ugh. But anyways, I told them, I was like, Mom, Dad, like I told Morgan I'm an atheist, and so I'm telling you now, I'm an atheist. Like I don't. Yeah. That's why my ex-wife is divorcing me, and they were like this, and this is the one thing I wasn't expecting them to do, was they were like, son, we don't care. We just want to care that you're safe, and we love you, and that's all we care about is the fact that we love you.
That's yeah. I hear that once in a while, but quite often I hear of families completely disowning their kids when they say they are atheist.
That's so fucking wrong, though. That is so fucking wrong for them to, like, they brought some of these people who are my friends, their parents brought them into this world one way or another, right? So like, why would you not want to encourage your child to be better? Or even if it's in my case, like I have a niece and a nephew, right? Why would I not want to encourage them to be better than their parents or be as good as them? Why would I not want to be that example of like, hey, like life's tough, but you know what? You got me, man, or girl, or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to be like superficial in this whole thing. It's just, it's like, hey, like I'm here if you want to talk. And at the same time, it's like, okay, like I get it. Like, go do your own thing, man. Like, you're your own person. Like, how can you disown somebody? And that really shows you it's more than just the indoctrination and the poison that religion is. It is just the it is the control. It's that bite level model control that
it's a lot. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, just it's like vomit inducing. It's awful when I hear people talk about the fact that they're disowning their own children. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You brought them into this world. Like, it's so anger inducing. Like, it makes me hurt more for the people who are being disowned and kicked out and ostracized from their family than it does for the parents. Like, you fail when you failed because you disowned them. Like, that's really what it boils down to.
Yep.
They failed, not the child necessarily.
Nope. Agreed. 100%.
Oh, God damn it. That makes me so mad. to hear stories like that. And I'm very fortunate because for as religiously leaning as my parents are, kind of, they've leaned more towards moderate. And that in a way has helped me repair my relationship with my parents and my family in general. And strangely enough, after I came out as an atheist, there's a whole lot of stuff that came out from that afterwards. And my ex-wife at the time used my atheism against me in my divorce. I live in the deep South, in the southern United States. A lot of these people do not take being an atheist very lightly or even very seriously. And so at times,
in a court of law, that's irrelevant.
Not down here. I wish I was making that up.
That's not the court of law. That's people's personal bias that's getting in the way of actual law.
No, I agree with you that it's bullshit, and I agree with you that in a court of law, that should not be a factor. But it was when I say it was used against me, it was used against me.
Yeah, that's fucking ignorant bullshit. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with that shit, man.
It's so when I hear stories like that, I'm like, I have no words. I have no words because like I went through it myself, and I'm now having to pick up the pieces, and I've done okay. Like I'm doing way fucking better than when I was during my divorce, and like. And this is the part that kind of blows my mind is like she called me a month and a half ago and she actually wanted to talk it out with me, and she actually apologized for everything that she put me through.
That's fantastic.
And I wasn't expecting that. But then when I found out that she was put on medication, I was like, oh.
Yeah, but
I was like, that explains.
Put on it for a reason, right?
But
you're right. It could explain her earlier behavior.
Yes, no, I agree with you. And I told her flat out, I was like, look, like, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about with her was like that, her behavior towards me. And I was like, oh my God, it that conversation we had and conversations we've subsequently had since then have so cleared up a lot of the things. Like I thought that like she was only really using me for like the paycheck that I had. And it turns out that was never the case. It's just that she admitted that, you know, like me, she was stubborn. She admitted that she was pushing people away because she didn't know how to handle my change. Like, and I will say to a point that does make me a little more guarded in some ways, because like if I tell somebody the truth about who I am, like unstable in mood or not, how are they going to react? Like I don't blame somebody for having problems. That's not what I'm blaming. It's just what you do with what your reaction is speaks more than your problems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It was very disheartening, but at the same time, now that we've made amends, now that we've had closure, and now that she's admitted to me, like, I don't hate you because you're an atheist. Like the one person who was supposed to love me for the rest of my life, and I get it.
No, supposed to be your player too. Remember?
Yes, and I don't regret going through all that. I don't regret it at all. I just wish that I would have known some of those things a long time ago. And I wish that I would have fought harder to, fight through the bullshit that I had to deal with in terms of, having the church tell me, oh, well, your parents think like we do, so don't question them. And that was just something I routinely heard all the time. If I would have fought more through that, if I would have fought more through a lot of different things, like I wouldn't have some of the perspectives I do. But hindsight's 2020, as they say, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't judge somebody because of what they didn't know. You can only judge them, I think, based on how they take their words and what they do and what they incite, I guess.
Oh.
I don't know if that's a way to say what I'm trying to think, but maybe you have a different way to put it.
Well, for me, when it comes to judging things, I withhold judgment until I see a reason to judge them for one way or another. So, I mean, I just kind of, but I think I know what you mean. Like
Well, I guess here's where I'm trying to get at is that, like, if I met you for the very first time, like, I'm not gonna like try to pick something out about you or pick a personality trait out about you.
yeah, people do that all the time, though. But that's not necessarily judging. Like judging, that's just more like he's got this look about him, so I'm going to assume that he's sort of in a category. But that's not judging. Like that's a little different.
But that still ties back into programming, right? That still ties back into
It's stereotyping.
that's what I was trying to get at, is the fact that it goes into the stereotyping and the programming of, like, oh, it's if like Neil looks a certain way, then he's got to be this type of person. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, you got to get to know the person before you can, make a decision on whether or not you want to have that person be a part of your life and, a part of you. And I was never taught that until I stepped away from all that. I kind of had to do a lot of this teaching of myself. Like nobody, and I guess this is kind of where I get a little disgruntled and a little bitter at times, is that nobody's stepped up to kind of teach me some of these things. Like I've had to teach myself a lot of these things, and in a way, I feel like I'm behind the curve in a lot of different ways. In terms of treating people, like I think I've pretty much got it down. Like how not necessarily, like, I try my best not to judge people, but I want to. I want to learn how to be an equal with someone like you or whoever I meet. You know what I mean? Like, in regard to friendships, and or even when trying to do, like, debates with somebody or discussions with somebody, and not judging them for what they think necessarily, but the methodology behind how they came to the conclusion that they did.
Epistemology.
There you go.
So, you got to remember too, the human species, we've been around for a long fucking time. And when we see people of a different tribe, we are going to assume and assess things based on visual cues, based on behavioral cues that we can see from a distance. And we are going to make judgments about that tribe to figure out whether or not they can be trusted, whether or not they're going to consume all our resources before we can. And then we make decisions based on those judgments. But that is like literally genetically encoded in us to do. But, as a species ages, we'll say, because I can't think of a better word at the time, but as we get better and better, every generation, we change evolutionarily, and we change for the better, for most of us anyways. There are some real schmucks out there, but anyway.
Well, that happens. They're schmucks. What are you going to do?
Yeah. But it's encoded into us for survival reasons. So we make assessments and judgments about people, so that we can, with the inner monologue of can I trust this person? Can I be with this person? Can I hang around this person? Is this person going to hurt me? Is this person going to take all my food? Is this, that's sort of why we end up doing that. Almost right when you look at somebody, you're going to make some kind of a judgment or assessment, right?
Right. No, I agree with you, but I will also preface, like, if you ever meet me in person, the way to my heart is my stomach, so be careful about that. So,
Me too.
yes. All right. So not only do we have music in common, we have
I'm a,
the propensity towards loving food in common,
oh yeah,
which
I'm a
is
foodie.
always a wonderful thing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, just oh god, like I I feel like I've been through so much in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, it can
It's
often feel that way.
yeah, it some days, I will not lie, is a little difficult to process. And I think that's also why I have to step away from not you or anybody else specifically, but that's why I have to step away from um, God. I don't want to use this term, but it's the easiest way I can describe it. Is staring.
Whatever.
That's why I have to step away from staring into the abyss.
Well, the abyss isn't going to do much for you. So, I mean, unless you're talking about the movie, which is a pretty good movie. But
I don't. I don't think I've seen that. Like, I mean, I've seen a bunch of older movies. Like, I'm a huge Stanley Kubrick fan, and
mhm,
so I loved Doctor Strangelove. Like, that's one of my
mhm,
favorite movies.
mhm,
I also liked Eyes Wide Shut. I loved Full Metal Jacket. I loved Jackie Brown.
mhm.
No, sorry, Jackie Brown is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Jackie Brown's a Tarantino movie, right? Or is that a
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not Kubrick. No,
no? Jackie Brown's Tarantino.
yeah, I
Okay,
think so. I don't
sorry, almost got that mixed up. Whew, that would. Yeah, yeah. No, I gotta brush.
know.
I gotta brush
Okay,
up on my movies, man. But
you're talking about Clockwork Orange.
oh yes, I love A Clockwork Orange. That was one of the most disturbing movies I've definitely seen. That's one of the
Yeah,
best movies I've ever seen. And surprisingly enough, I think this movie was released in 2012. Um, the very first Sinister. Have you ever seen that?
yes, I have.
Tell me that was not a great movie, and just the way they played the horror aspect. None of this
Well, yeah,
cheesy, none of this cheesy like strings and ambient atmospheric music, and a lot of the effect actually came in the absence of all that, which is one of
yes,
the greatest things about it. It's just that like when there's silence, it fucks with you, but it
yeah.
fucks with you in such the most glorious way possible. And you're just like fuck fuck the whole time, and it's just like oh god, it like Sinister had me watching, like I couldn't turn my eyes away. It was just that captivating. I
Yep,
love a good movie like that. Now don't get me wrong, music in movies definitely has a place, but
yep.
it doesn't always need to, like if you want to make a shitty horror movie, put all the music in it you want, but you don't always have to
Well,
have
music
you don't
and
always.
music being in a horror movie doesn't automatically make it shitty. But
No,
yeah, I hear
I so yes, I agree with you there, but I'm just saying like a lot of the
people
time
use
it's
music to help with the mood, right? So
no, no,
music can, right? So
it reinforces it.
yeah, yeah,
It reinforces it, but it doesn't always, and that's one of the things that Sinister did, was it turned it on its head. Was it didn't need that to create the atmosphere.
well, right, sure. That's good storytelling.
Yes, and a lot of times in movies, good storytelling can substitute for that,
Sure.
and that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone over 2 hours, my friend,
Oh shit,
and
have we?
yeah. And normally
Well,
I keep these to about an hour, but
well, I hope I've entertained people more for you than I have done anything else.
well, I would have put an end to it a lot earlier if it wasn't entertaining. It was for me, anyways. Like
Well,
just hearing
hopefully
all
other people got stuff
the.
out of it too. So,
Well, they're,
I,
they're still in the chat, so I would imagine so.
well, there you go. Last thing I want to say though, so you can get on and hang out with your family and whatnot, is and it's I'm on the East Coast, by the way, so I'm three
Yes.
hours ahead of you. So it's almost it's a 11:15 right now.
Yeah, quarter
So
after. Yeah.
Yeah. So, last thing I just want to put out to anybody who is, watching this or whoever will stumble across this is that don't be afraid. Don't do what I did and be afraid to ask questions. Like if you've got a question,
Never be afraid.
there are resources, there are libraries, there's the internet, there's even your family. And if you like just don't be afraid to find out the right answer. Don't be afraid to find out where you truly stand on a lot of things. Just because you're just because of the way you grew up,
Mhm.
it was ingrained in you. It doesn't mean that you have to believe that way. If you do, there's always good in some things that you can retain. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are things that you're going to have to throw away. And if that means, unfortunately, throwing away your faith, then that's what you have to do. But that doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes
True.
you somebody who's trying to, in a way, trying to find the right answer. And there's nothing wrong with trying to find the right answer. Well, I was taught something in nuclear power a long time ago, which was if you are learning something, a lot of times you only have one time to learn something, and sometimes you only have one time to learn something right. I am a firm believer in embracing my mortality. We only have this one life, in my opinion. I might as
That's
well
right.
try to live it to the best of my ability, make the friends I want, and or not, because that's a thing that people do. But you have the right to learn, and you have the right to answer questions, and you owe it to not anybody else but yourself to find the answer.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't
Also,
matter what anyone else thinks.
right. And also, I don't know is also an appropriate answer.
It's intellectually honest, right?
And yeah, I guess it would be, although like I guess intellectually honest versus trying to make shit up, because you don't want to try to make shit
Yeah.
up. I work in a community where you're not allowed to make shit up. So
There you go. So it taught you to stay away from that.
yeah, they definitely reinforced. That is one of the good things the nuclear community did for me, which was if you there is an answer, but sometimes if you don't have the answer, there's always a way to get to a conclusion.
Yep, that's right.
But
There always- Oh,
occasionally you have to say, I'm not sure. And if you're not sure, that's just a greater opportunity to learn something.
I agree totally.
I will let you go, man, because we've been, oh Jesus, I'm more
Rambling
down. Yeah,
for
I'm also
2
more
hours.
down. I'm more down on this bottle than I thought I was going to be. So
I'm empty now. I got to get a refill. So,
well,
anyways,
I wonder whose problem that is. So,
well, the beer fridge is like right over there, so I could
Well-
easily have gotten one, but that's
well,
okay.
you take it easy, my friend. I will be around when I can, and go have fun.
No, Randolph, I'm not howling like a wolf. Sorry.
I won't either. That may be in part of my name, but I'm not doing it. You can't make me.
Anyways, thanks, dude, for joining me today and sharing this story with us. Yeah, it was there was a lot in there. You unpacked quite a bit with that, and with everything that you spoke about, just seeing and experiencing that you have come out of it, in my opinion, on top and better off. So you're what I call a success story, man. And you've got all of us here in the community that are always going to be got your back for you whenever you need. Just remember that. Right,
Well,
guys? So if you don't know who Lone Wolf Atheist is, he used to be known as Godless Musicians. You can follow him. I have links to his YouTube channel below. He's got a bunch of videos, so go check them out. And I also have links to his Twitter account as well. So give him a follow. He's good people, obviously, as you've now heard over the past 2 hours and 10 minutes, which I think is a record for my show, to be honest.
Look, man, I'm not into breaking records. I'm in more to just being real. You know what I mean?
Sure, but that you could just consider that icing on the cake.
Woot! I'm all about icing.
There you go. And thanks everyone also for tuning in and hanging out with us. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you did, remember to smash the like button and share it out if you would be so kind. Remember, sharing is caring. And as the late great Richard, I was going to say Richard Dawkins, but it wasn't him. It's the late great Christopher Hitchens once said, as I always say at the end of these things, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. Oh, and before I go, there is no after party today because I am at my sister's and it's her birthday and I've got to get to attending the birthday party. But
it's because he's having an actual party, which it's okay to have an actual party. So go fucking party, dude.
I'm going to. I'm a little too old to be partying, but I'll sit in the corner and drink my beer like a good old person.
You're never too old, man. I know that you've probably easily got 20 plus on me, but you know what? I've met people who are supposedly around your age who their opinion is they're never too old to party. But seriously, guys, this is a good dude. Subscribe. Like I'll even pimp you out on my own channel. Subscribe to fucking Neil. He's a good guy.
Awesome, dude. Thanks a lot. Anyways, guys, he has promised to jump into another after party when I get him going again. And I'll just let you guys know now, before we go, the next interview I have is on Monday, and it is with Thomas Westbrook, otherwise known as Holy Kool-Aid. So I hope you guys can tune in and check that one out as well. I'm probably sure we'll go into overtime as well because Thomas is in the NIFB takedown group that I'm in as well. So we'll probably be talking a little bit about that at some of our success stories, which should be pretty cool. Anyways, guys, remember. Huh?
No, he said he was going to post a video on his channel recently about his interaction with Steven Anderson. So hopefully he actually does do that.
He will. It's in the works. Don't worry. I can tell you that first. It's coming. Don't even worry.
I'll be around. Trust me.
Well, tune in on Monday then if you guys want to check it out. And until next time, guys, be well and treat each other with respect. All right.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next time.